Good morning, everyone. My name is Anna Jacobelli, and I'm the Senior Vice President, Metro West Region of TD Bank Group. I also serve as Vice Chair of the Joseph Brant Hospital Foundation Board. To begin, we acknowledge that the land on which we gather is part of the treaty lands and the territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit. We acknowledge the responsibility to honor and respect the four directions, land, waters, plants, animals, ancestors that walked before us, and all of the wonderful elements of creation that exist. We wish to respect and honor the original peoples of this land and the histories and lived experiences of these communities. It is our commitment to learn and unlearn, support reconciliation, and foster strong relationships as we operate on these traditional lands now and for generations to come. Thank you for joining us for the fourth annual Women Leadership and Philanthropy panel discussion in celebration of International Women's Day presented by TD Bank Group. This is such a special event and provides the opportunity for us to showcase the power of women's voices and their actions as leaders and philanthropists in our community. This year, International Women's Day campaign theme is Break the Bias, which asks us to imagine a world free of bias, stereotypes, and discrimination, a world that is diverse, equitable, and inclusive. I am proud to work for TD, where diversity and inclusion are part of our fundamental values that help us support our customers, our colleagues, and our communities. I look forward to the important discussion this morning with our impressive panel, who are all working in their field towards an equitable and inclusive future. And I would like to acknowledge Joseph Brant Hospital for the important, life-changing work they continue to do in support of women and girls. As a reminder today, all gifts made through this event go to Nina's Place and will be matched by TD, which will help fund programming and supplies for women and children in our community who are fleeing violence, a need which is unfortunately at an all-time high during this pandemic. If you haven't already done so, you can make a gift, and would like to, it's not too late. Simply click on the donate button below. Now it is my honor to welcome the Mayor of the City of Burlington, Mary Ann Mead Ward, who was a panelist at our inaugural event, to bring greetings this morning. Over to you, Mary Ann.
Thank you so much, Anna. It's a delight to be here with all of you. It's another stellar attendance, and I know we're all looking forward to when we can do this in person, which is soon. It's coming. I have a long history of experience with Joseph Brant Hospital. My twins were born at the hospital in 2000. My husband was brought back to health from a life-threatening illness. My mother-in-law spent her last days there, as did my father, receiving excellent care. And I served on the board of the hospital for 7 years before I went into public office. And I know firsthand the amazing work that our hospital does. And the hospital has been there for me and my family over many decades, and they've been there for us, particularly through the last 2 years that we have gone through this pandemic. We have seen the hospital be there as a vaccination clinic, caring for people with COVID. And I also want to just give a huge shout out to our whole community for every effort that you have made to keep our infection rates down. We have done an amazing job getting through this together, and it's with the help of our frontline workers, our nurses, our doctors, everyone at the hospital, that we have gotten through this pandemic so well. And it's really, really inspiring to be here today with the wonderful women and panelists. I really look forward to hearing what they have to say. I really like this year's theme for International Women's Day, Breaking the Bias. And in part, that's about women going into fields that aren't traditional for women. And I know a little bit about that in politics. We have something special going on in Burlington. We have 3 out of 4 women on council who, 3 out of 4 of our council members are women. For our MPs, 2 out of 3 MPs are women, and 2 out of 3 MPPs are women. And that means about 50% of our representation here in Burlington is women, but that is very unusual. Very unusual. Only 30% of women across the country serve in elected roles, and the numbers are even smaller for mayors. Only 18% of mayors across this country are women. So we have work to do still in getting women to be able to run and to break the bias around politics and women. So I'm really looking forward to hearing our inspiring speakers. I would now like to turn things over to Anissa Hilborn to introduce them. And thank you so much, all of you, for being here today.
Thank you so much, Mayor Mead Ward and Anna, for your remarks and being with us today. And happy International Women's Day to everyone. My name is Anissa Hilborn. I am the president of the Joseph Brant Hospital Foundation, and I'm absolutely thrilled to be here today and joined by this incredible group of women. And I know that you're all looking forward to what today will be, which is a wonderful event. So please join me in welcoming today's panelists. We have Barbara Elliott, Director of Professional Marketing at Johnson & Johnson and Vice Chair of the Joseph Brant Hospital. Claire Gillis, Executive Vice President and President of Consumer Marketing at Bell. Lisa Marcuzzi, Vice President, General Counsel, and Chief Equality, Diversity, and Inclusion Officer at ArcelorMittal Dofasco. And Karen Roach, Burlington's Fire Chief. Thank you for being part of our conversation today, and we truly do want this to be a conversation. So if you have any questions or comments for our panelists, please put them in the chat, and we will get to as many questions as we can today. So before we begin, I do want to thank TD Bank Group, presenting sponsor for this event for the 4th year in a row. As many of you know, TD has been at the forefront of discussing women's philanthropy, and we are absolutely thrilled to continue our partnership and have your support of many of our initiatives at Joseph Brant Hospital Foundation. So thank you. I would also like to thank Bell for your sponsorship. We are tremendously grateful for your ongoing support of all of our initiatives and the work we do. So thank you so much to Bell. And as Anna mentioned, donations today are going to Nina's Place, the Regional Sexual Assault and Domestic Violence Treatment Center for Halton, which is located right here in our hospital. Thank you to everyone who has donated so far, and especially to TD, who is matching all of these gifts, doubling the impact of your generosity. We are very close to reaching $15,000 raised in support of Nina's Place today. So as Anna mentioned earlier, and if you haven't already, but you still want to make a difference in the lives of women who come and seek support at Nina's Place, you can do so by clicking on the donate button below. Finally, before we get started, I want to take a moment to acknowledge the heartbreaking tragedy that's unfolding in Ukraine. Today on International Women's Day, I'm reminded of the role women play in the responsibilities that we take on in supporting our families. And we see that struggle and the hardships felt by I think it's over 2 million refugees now that I heard this morning, and the majority of whom are women and children. It is truly inspiring to see the support right here from our own community, as well as around the world for the Ukraine and for those suffering. And I do know that you will join me in hoping for a swift and peaceful conclusion to this conflict. Okay, so now let's get to know our panelists a bit better. And we'd like to start off by learning more about your careers. So Claire, I think we'll start with you. You started your career as a co-op student at Bell, and now you're the Executive Vice President and President of Consumer Marketing. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey and about some of the lessons learned and opportunities that presented themselves along the way?
Sure, thanks, and good morning, everyone. Yes, certainly it's been quite a journey. I joined Bell over 20 years ago. Originally a McMaster student, destined or with an aspiration to go to medical school. I took a bit of a detour when I got into my final year and decided to pivot and do my MBA. As I went through my career, I started at Mobility at the time, which was still fairly nascent. You can imagine we actually held it as a separate business apart from Bell because they weren't sure what would happen with the wireless industry all those years ago. So it's quite a funny story when you ask folks who were there. Since then, I went through various different positions, driving marketing and sales, eventually becoming the president of The Source, which is our consumer electronics retailer. And then I returned in 2020 as the president of Mobility. And today I lead the consumer group for both our wireless and our wireline businesses. You know, when you think about the lessons you learn along the way as you take these detours and you navigate, there's sort of 5 things that I would share with this group. First of all, no one can do the work but you. You're the only one who can do the work, and it's important that you self-reflect and evaluate it. Number 2, take risks. I knew nothing about the consumer electronics industry when I went there, became the president, but I walked the floor. You know, I remember my very first day, you know, this philosophy of you have to go to where the work is done. And I remember walking the warehouse and talking to everyone in the building and learning as much as I could. Point number 3, surround yourself with incredible people, people you trust, people who have your back. And then finally, find your sponsor. You know, I've been very fortunate, and I know we'll probably get to the topic of sponsorship here today, but that is really quite critical because those individuals will help pull you through your career and catapult you and help you learn at an accelerated rate.
That's great, Claire. Barbara, you also have an interesting career path as well. You started off as a dental hygienist. Then you transitioned into being the leader of pharmaceutical field, and now you also serve on the Joseph Brant Hospital board. So can you tell us how you made that career transition? Was it similar to what Claire just described, and how your volunteer role with Joseph Brant actually fits into that journey?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today to have this great conversation with all of you. Yeah, sort of I think Claire's probably got a little bit more of an impressive start to her career. I started out as a dental hygienist, and you know, I graduated in 1980, and at that time I chose dental hygiene because really going into dentistry was more what men would do. And so it really didn't even occur to me to go into dentistry. So I went into hygiene. I was interested in healthcare. So, and I'm from here, I'm from Burlington, went to Nelson High School, so I'm a local. But I moved out west and I practiced in dental hygiene for clinical dental hygiene for about 5 years. And then I wanted to kind of like develop in my profession. So I started teaching. So I started teaching at colleges and universities in dental hygiene programs. And through that, I learned a lot around presentation and oversight for classrooms and evaluations and things like that. And then my personal circumstances changed and I came back to Burlington. I was a single mom and I had a 7.5-year-old son who is now 30 and all good. And I just needed the support of my family. I have a fabulous large family here in Burlington, but I made a couple of declarations to myself. And one was that I was going to continue to advance my career beyond dental hygiene and into broader healthcare. And the second declaration was that when I came back to my hometown, I wanted to sort of redefine who I was as an adult coming back, and that would be in the realm of philanthropy. And so I ended up working for Pfizer and Johnson & Johnson, and I took on increasingly more advanced roles and more leadership roles and broader scopes across different portfolios. And so over the course of my career there, I've ended up being, you know, the functional lead and director for professional marketing, which I think has really created an incredible amount of knowledge and bench strength to even start to consider something like the Joseph Brant Hospital Board. And to me, that was nirvana. It was like, if I could be in healthcare and make a contribution in a much bigger way, then that was definitely an aspiration of mine. And when I did move back here, I started work with the Rotary Hospice project, which is now the Carpenter Hospice, and started some fundraising there. So it was sort of, you know, steps along the way in broadening. And I think, you know, Claire made some really interesting points about sort of key learnings. And I think for me, I think it's around, you've got to be bold. And it's okay to be bold. And if you're feeling it in your gut, you have it, you want it. I would say be prepared. You want to make sure that you're prepared for the steps that you're taking. And the other piece is you're not alone. When you step into the realm of larger areas and more advanced areas of leadership, you are one part of the contribution. There are incredible people and talent around a table that are having courageous conversations, important conversations, and together are coming up with great solutions and services and making a community impact together. So you don't need to be the one that knows it all. You need to be the one that's really interested and passionate and has done some preparation along the way. And the rest of the mentorship and the rest of your team will bring you along. So being a part of the Joseph Brant Hospital in a community in which I was raised is very meaningful to me. And I'm honored to be a part of it. And I work with incredible people at that hospital on the board and the SLT. So very happy to be here today and have this conversation. Thanks.
Thanks, Barbara. And just touching on your volunteer role and your experience here at the hospital and before that, the hospice and others, you know, we're seeing across the charitable sector, women taking on more visible leadership roles in philanthropy, primarily within organizations, volunteer, as well as professional roles as well. And Lisa, I know that you have a variety of board experience and you're an active member of the community. Can you tell us why this is so important to you and how it supports both your professional and personal goals?
Sure. First, I just want to say happy International Women's Day and so delighted to be part of this. I get energized when I'm with a bunch of fantastic women. So thank you for including me. So I'm not originally from the area. And one thing I think that you need to do to understand where you're going to be spending the vast majority of the hours of your day is to get involved in the community. And I see it as being in two buckets. It's the career and the personal. And I clearly recognize, as you all do, that you can't always separate the two. But if I look at why it's important to me professionally, is it does give me an opportunity to strengthen my professional credibility, build my resume. You know, I didn't start my career really planning well. I was a people pleaser and just wanted to tick the box and please my mom and dad and then please my friends and everything. And as I gradually became older and wiser, though I'm still very young at heart, it truly was about where I wanted to go and what I could do. So board experience, build my expertise, exposure to others, corporate cultures, businesses. It gets me to live vicariously out of the hours that I do day in and day out. Learning different cultures, interacting with some fantastic people, and it's an asset to my career. And, you know, I've got the lawyer thing down really well. I've been doing it for 25 years. But I needed to do things other than what I was a lawyer. So when I first started to get involved in my community, get involved with the boards, I did leverage my legal skills. I let them benefit. And then I needed to put that aside because that was what I was doing day in and day out. So I got to get expertise in other areas, other industries, and it makes me better at my job day in and day out. I also now participate in Burlington and Hamilton, and I recognize faces, I recognize organizations, influential people I'm circulating with, and it gives me this whole network of people to run to when I need to ask a question, need some help, need someone to volunteer. Then I look at myself personally, and then I get to brand myself. And, you know, each experience that you get really does add to how you grow as a person, how you grow as a professional. And I became well equipped, and seeing all that on my resume made people pay attention to me. And I found that the board work became more and more satisfying, but then became personally rewarding. I'm a very curious person. I love to learn. I like to be intellectually challenged. So I can go from one industry to another. I joined the art gallery in Hamilton, and I didn't know enough about art. And then I fell in love with things. I am mother of an adopted child. I was part of the Adoption Council of Ontario because I could find all these resources and I could build things. And further, it gives me an opportunity to give back. I was raised in a family, loving and everything, but you had to be part of your community. We can't expect people to do everything alone. And I mean, if COVID hasn't taught us anything, it's that we can be there for one another. So you can effectively support your organizations, get involved in something that's passionate about, And then I'm building my career to retirement, where I don't want to work 9 to 5, and then I can be part of a board and still be intellectually challenged.
Yeah, I liked, well, obviously, I liked your comments about giving back, given my profession. But I think, what we're also seeing is now more than in the past, women are increasingly becoming the primary decision makers about philanthropy and the desired outcome, I should say, or the impact of that gift. And so they're driving a lot of those decisions about giving. And Claire, I know that you're very involved in the not-for-profit sector as well as a volunteer. Can you share with us the factors that you personally consider when you're thinking about supporting a charity for making a donation?
Of course. So as many people know, Bell is very involved in mental health. And many years ago, we made a commitment and a pledge as a corporation to donate $155 million to everything from anti-stigma programs and education to research and workplace leadership. So a couple things that I do outside of my regular day job. Most recently, I joined the Kids Help Phone Board. And most people here today would be familiar with Kids Help Phone. It is the largest youth program in the country, and we support 24/7 available service. And one of the things not everybody would know is just the impact this pandemic over the last couple of years has had on our children. And I'll maybe just take a moment, because for me, this was, kind of a real pivot point that said, you need to get involved and you need to help make change happen and provide, some support for this group. Over the last couple of years, there's been over 9 million interactions. What happened between 2019 and 2020 is we saw exponential growth and engagement with Canada's youth on the platform, everything from bullying to suicide prevention. And, when I look at this organization, what made me so excited is, number one, of course, Bell was a founding partner in Kids Help Phone some 30 years ago. But when you surround yourself in the people like both Lisa and Barbara spoke to, you see this whole new community. You talk to people in different industries with different diverse backgrounds and different knowledge sets, and they really sort of come together for that common goal. And, as someone, I have an 11-year-old daughter. And when you see how the kids react to the conversation and you start engaging with youth and you talk to, again, the frontline folks, the counselors who are on the phones and on the text chat with these people, and you see firsthand the impact that you're having. Why Kids Help Phone for me? Well, obviously it's youth and it's the future of our country. And quite frankly, we should go beyond that into the borders of the world. But for me, they're also very progressive. And I think that's important for anyone as you're looking. You never want to just sort of stay in the status quo. How do we move the initiatives forward, the agendas forward? And when I look at Kids Help Phone, it's not just about a crisis helpline that's there in the moment, but we've started to move that organization back in the value chain, understand, do research, evaluate the data, and work and partner outside of the organizations. So does it make you feel great about the work you're doing? Yes. Do you get to see it firsthand? As others have said, do you make new connections? But the reality is we're making change happen. We're making progress happen to, advance the future for Canadians and quite frankly, our country. So there's nothing sort of more satisfying than that, and the smiles that you get and the recognition you get from the people who you're supporting.
Yeah, that's very true. And I really, the work that Kids Help Phone does is incredible. And we have our own child and adolescent psychiatric program here at the hospital. And we've seen more than a 50% increase in referrals over the last year, particularly around the pandemic. And last year, more than 50% of children and adolescents have reported clinically significant depressive symptoms. And that's significant for all of us. And so, I really echo your words, Claire, and your experience in that. You talk to them and you see the difference, particularly philanthropy can make in the lives of these young people. It's really our future that we're investing in.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So thank you. Would love to shift now the conversation to representation of women in the workplace and leadership roles in particular. And Karen, you are one of the few fire chiefs in North America who is a female. How have you seen women's roles change in your industry over the last few years?
Thanks for the question, and thank you for inviting me here today. It's just awesome to be here on this great panel. I would say that in the last 15 to 20 years, more women are embarking on the fire service as a viable career, whether it be a firefighter, public information, fire prevention inspectors, public education. I think how this has shifted is because of the concerted effort in terms of outreach in the community. So I was the former director on the Fire Service Women Ontario, just one of many directors. And back in 2014, we formed the very first Camp Fit in Hamilton when I was with Hamilton Fire. And Hamilton, as you probably know, is a very old department, very male-dominated department. And when this first came forward, I presented it to the chief in Hamilton, and wow, did I ever get a lot of help and assistance coming forward. It was highly successful. And since then, coming back to Burlington, Camp Ignite, I've also been involved in Camp Molly, which was a partnership here in Halton Region with Milton Fire Department, Halton Hills, and certainly Oakville and ourselves. So these have been very proactive, camps, and the whole goal around it is really to give young women an opportunity to get a bit of a glimpse of all the range of careers within the fire service. So that's not just about being a firefighter. Mind you, that's probably the most popular part of all of this. There's fitness training. They learn about personal protective equipment. They learn all about, fireground skills. Like, it's a very comprehensive 3 days. And my experience has been that when you offer a camp like that for 3 or 4 days, the young women are just lining up to put up their hand and be a part of it. So it's been highly successful in this area, certainly. And I'm very pleased to say that, Burlington itself sits above the provincial average as it relates to the number of women in the fire service. It's not just me. We have 11 female firefighters, 3 captains. Our supervisor of training is female, 1 public education officer, 10 telecommunicators, and 2 senior fire management. So I think that speaks holistically to the drive in Burlington to be accepting, diverse, inclusive. And I think when you have someone who has been a proponent in that, working with all the young women in our department, that change comes about very easily. I've always been about, empowering young women, and certainly being a role model as much as I possibly can. And if I can at least leave the position when I retire, leaving the department in a better position, in terms of our balance of women, I will welcome the day when people don't ask me a question about how many women are in your department. I want that to be the norm. It needs to be the norm, and we're getting there, one hire at a time.
Yeah. Well, you do. I know you are a fellow of the International Association of Fire Chiefs Diversity Executive Leadership Program. So a lot of what you described, is that part of that program that we're seeing results for in Burlington? Or what do you see as a future for women in the emergency response sector?
Okay. The IDELP program, which is the International Diversity Executive Leadership Program, I'm still in that program. And COVID has kind of thrown that off a little bit, but we'll be regrouping this August. So I'm very excited about that, because not only does it support a diverse workforce, it also looks at advancing the rank structure in leadership in women in the fire service. So this is about building up women. Women make great officers and chief officers. And one thing I noticed about down in the United States is that there are so many more women in the fire service than there are in Canada. But it's taken those lessons learned from what they've done and sort of paved that way in order to help assist us with our sort of our goals. The IDELT program is wonderful in that it ends up being it's like a international standing diversity and inclusion committee. We identify many of the fire departments who have leading practices, and we share those practices across the board. And the other thing is that we also try to provide resources to support the development of underrepresented races and individuals in many sectors. And I think that is in of itself is a very powerful message. And so then what we've done is we've created a Canadian similar area of responsibility. The Canadian Association of Fire Chiefs has since created their own women fire chiefs committee, and I'm a part of that. So what I like about that is that we continue to break down barriers, deconstructing biases, and trying to foster and promote an inclusive and respectful workplace. So it's still early days, but man, when you see the impact that it is having across the fire service, there are so many more fire chiefs, assistant deputy chiefs, more than what I've ever seen in my entire career. And I've been at this for over 25 years. So it's quite impressive when you see it.
That's wonderful. And it makes me think, when you measure something, you pay attention to it. And I think, Lisa, you lived that at ArcelorMittal Dofasco because you are taking steps to increase representation of women by tracking actual key performance indicators, like percentage of women in management, percentage of women in succession plans. Can you tell us why your organization took that important step and give some examples of some initiatives that help achieve those performance indicators?
Sure. So at ArcelorMittal Dofasco, our strength is people. And we know that if we're going to succeed, we have to leverage diversity through an inclusive workforce and a workplace culture. Now, we know that we don't reflect the community that we work in, and we need to. And diversity and inclusion result in a workplace where respect, equity, differences are cultivated, voices are heard, everyone feels valued, and they get to bring their whole self to work each day. That is part of the values on our playbook. And this requires more than commitment, as you mentioned, and it requires some measurable goals. So we're part of a global organization, one of the leading steel and mining companies in the world. And as part of our commitment in 2020 to a workplace for tomorrow, our global parent companies set new targets. And they're starting with women. And they are dedicated to and committed to doubling women in management positions over the next decade. And we are currently at 12.5% in the steel industry, and we want to double that to 25% by 2030. And just this past year, we increased the number of women on our public board from 30% to 36%. But let's talk locally at Dofasco. Our ED&I strategic roadmap, we have a 5-year strategic roadmap, and which is designed, and we've got KPIs driven at attracting and retaining diverse talent, building strong, high-performing teams, and cultivating engaged leaders who inspire inclusion and champion diversity. So we've committed to increasing women in leadership roles by 10% this year, and we're going to continue to add to our targets on an annual basis. Our numbers aren't great. Right now, our records indicate that our workforce, we have 12% of our workforce is women. 10% in leadership roles. Interestingly, we have 23% of our senior leadership roles are women. We recently signed on to the federal government's 50-30 challenge. And our journey began, it was individual employees putting their hand up, saying what we've done. We gradually put in a strategic roadmap, working with external consultants. I took on the role as executive sponsor, Chief Equality, Diversity, and Inclusion Officer in 2020. We've got a long way to go. Eliminating bias, we're focusing on in our recruiting and our succession planning. We're benchmarking and working with our external experts that will aid our progress to deliver a diverse, high-performing team. So baby steps, little successes, not where we want to be, but certainly on the right track.
No, that's really great. And it's really wonderful to hear that sort of determination and focused approach, because I think that's what will achieve results. That's great. I do now want to shift more to, our mental well-being. We touched on it a little bit earlier with Claire's comments about children and youth and work-life balance. And I think what we've seen in the pandemic is that struggle, particularly for a lot of women around that work-life balance. And I think there are two reasons. I think, it's been difficult on everyone, whether you're a woman or man or any gender. Last year it was reported that 1 in 4 Canadians age 18 and older have reported symptoms of depression, anxiety, PTSD, and that is really significant. And I think, when we look at the pandemic and many women who were forced to make the choice to leave their jobs in order to care for their families and their children, many feeling that the pandemic would be short-lived and they'd be able to get back to it. But more than half of year-over-year unemployment or employment losses were for women, which is significant. And we're having trouble to get back into the workplace. Others, made the choice to leave for personal reasons and to find that work-life balance. And so, Barbara, this next question is for you. I want to know, or I think we all want to know, how you've been navigating the balance between work, life, and family throughout the pandemic, and what impact have you seen in others in the healthcare sector from the last 2 years of what we've all gone through?
Yeah, I have to say, and as you mentioned, like COVID has affected all of us in different ways. Now, in my phase of life, I am not, juggling a lot with, I don't have young children at home and that sort of thing. So personally, I have to say it's been less, but I have watched this with the organization that I work with that's relatively young. And it's been really, really difficult, being the teachers at home, keeping the house together, just, it's an always on environment. So I think that's been extremely stressful, especially when, especially when our colleagues needed to pivot so quickly to supply chain issues and everything else. So the demands of the work increased at the same time as the requirement to actually multitask on priorities within the home. So I think that, there has been that's been happening, at least in my workplace, as well as some of the even younger colleagues that we have that are living alone in apartments in Toronto. And I think that was extremely difficult as well, because it was very isolating. I think, at the hospital, there's been obviously a significant impact. And as a board, we've been extremely focused on understanding like how we can help. And to be quite frank, it's a bit of a helpless feeling in some ways, because unless you're, putting on the gloves and the mask and you've got the credentials to be in there looking after patients, it can be difficult. But, the frontline workers, they really are the backbone of our community, as is the hospital. And it has taken a massive toll on everyone in that hospital that had to pivot from what their core role was to actually work in different departments to be a frontline worker when they were actually a surgical nurse or an internist or something else like that. I think it's been, extremely disruptive to their personal lives. It's been extremely disruptive to their professional lives. It has invited a lot of burnout and things like that. What I will say is that the senior leadership team at the hospital, Eric Vandewaal as well as Ian Prarat, their leadership and their ability to hold hands with everyone within every level of the organization of Joseph Brant Hospital was absolutely inspiring to read and to watch. And so I'm really proud of, so the outreach and the mitigation of at least trying to make it, as best they could. But again, it's very difficult if you're not a frontline worker to, wave a magic wand and then you're the one doing that. So I can see that there are a number of layers of impact that has had, for sure.
Yeah. No, like you, I'm in the hospital environment as well, and I've seen that. And it's been incredible to watch the leadership of and the work of many of our nurses, as well as our physicians, everyone trying to get through this and finding that balance. And I think, Karen, you probably know this as well from the first responders. And I imagine there's a number of programs in place and support systems as well in the emergency services sector. If you want to give us a little sense of that.
Absolutely. To echo some of what Barbara just said, our healthcare has really worked hard throughout this entire pandemic. I don't know if people know, but I'm a former ICU nurse from Toronto back in my days of nursing, but the strain, it's visible, and you can see it on the staff at the hospital, but we love them and support them, so that's always a good thing. In terms of the fire service, we've embraced several programs. One is called the Road to Mental Readiness. It's called the R2MR, and it's the Working Mind. And this was a Health Canada initiative designed to address and promote health and reduce the stigma of mental illness. So what this does is it's a chart, and it helps us be able to sort of, at a glance, be able to identify some of the issues with people coping with it, things at work. What's the resiliency like? Certainly trying to be part of a supportive workplace. My thought here in Burlington has always been family first. And that is the most important aspect of what I do. I think it's about being there for your staff. The other initiative we have is peer support. So these are programs that have been ongoing. And what that means is that we have some trained individuals that are able to be an in-house resource for staff and their family members to support them both professionally and personally outside of the job. And so it provides a lot of assistance. And if we hear about someone struggling, it's like all hands are on deck. And we really do make this a concerted effort to ensure that we are providing the individual a safe, non-judgmental, confidential environment where we can have those conversations. I don't mean me, I mean professionals. And that is very important. Anytime there's an opportunity to have guest speakers coming in, I always try to key that up. We've had Everyday Resilience by Dr. Robin Hanley Defoe come and speak to our crews. And I think that is completely valuable. And when you do all these right measures, I always say that if you're struggling, text me, call me, tell me what you need from me, and I will, help you. And that's not just me, it's our team. And our team is very, very much about doing the right thing for staff. So it's been a tough go these last 2 years. And I can tell you that I can't wait to see the back door end on that whole chapter, certainly. But, there's better days ahead. But, I work with the very best, and I'm thankful to have them working with me day in and day out.
Yeah, I think that absolutely. And I think that, your point about talking to each other, I think as women, we are very good communicators, are very good emotionally to convey how we're feeling. And I think that is so important to be able to get through what we've gone through and to continue to build that resilience going forward.
It's somewhat different in the fire service to have women in roles like my own role, that it tends to be a little bit more nurturing for staff, more approachable. It's not this big bravado thing happening. I'm not really about that. It's about if you need something, come talk to me, and we'll make it right. And I think that's important. And it shows a very, very clear shift in the fire service from being the paramilitary to where we are right now, which is very welcoming. So thank you.
That's wonderful. Thanks, Karen. Now I would like to open up 2 questions from our audience. And there's one that came in quite early. And like Claire, you touched on sponsors and mentors earlier. So maybe I'll direct this to you and anyone else can jump in. But how would you recommend I connect with and engage a mentor while working remotely? I think sometimes the distance is a challenge as well.
Well, I think there's a couple things. I mean, first of all, just so everybody's on the same playing field and understanding, mentorship can evolve into sponsorship, but sponsorship, as I think a lot of people here would discuss, is evolved over time, right? Like it's a different context, and you'll often have very few sponsors in your life, but you may have different mentors. In terms of actually going about it, interestingly, like over the years, I've been involved in a number of sort of organized mentorship programs, like the Canadian Marketing Association, as an example. You can reach out to them and they do pairing. So, one of the things or resources I would encourage people to use, if it's not sort of at your own business, but you're perhaps looking for something beyond the boundaries of your own organization, you can actually go, and there's a lot of sort of resource sites who will do mentor connections. And what's great about them is people have sort of raised their hand and said, yes, I'm interested, and I'm making a personal commitment to helping others. I think that's one. The second thing I would just add before I sort of open it up for others is I've never said no to a coffee, a virtual coffee or an in-person coffee. And I think, along my career, there's been people that I've asked, to take a half an hour out of their day. Those individuals have always said yes. They've always been very generous with their time, and play it forward as you will. And in turn, when people have asked me, I've often done that as well. And, sometimes it means early in the morning or later in the evening. But I think it's not as hard as people believe. The key thing is, finding someone who's a good match for you and is as committed to your success as you are, and shown that same level of interest.
Yeah, and before anyone else jumps in, I would say also the flip, being a mentor is as rewarding as having one. You learn so much from those you mentor as well, and it's I have one of my mentors, Mary Deacon, who Claire is a mutual friend of ours, who's wonderful. We met through work. We went our separate ways, but we still connect quite regularly, and it's wonderful having that touch point and sounding board. Anyone else? Lisa, would you like to jump in?
Just a couple of thoughts. Learn from my mistakes. I really 30-year career, and I think I spent the first 8 just doing what people wanted me to do. I didn't really kind of think it through. So I agree, functional, professional, external mentoring, but also internal is, you'll find that person you're comfortable with and just ask. The other thing too is a lot of people, we have really big organizations that we work with, and people don't realize that there are mentoring programs established. So ask if there is. And secondly, I think, for us in the executive levels of the company trying to navigate this virtual remote working, and we hear about the Great Resignation, and people are moving. You can hire people from a different province to do all this sort of thing. Is, I love the culture at ArcelorMittal Dofasco. It is like huge. It slams you in the face when you walk in the door. And then the concern was, how are our new employees coming on, learn that culture if we're working virtually? So I think we as leaders in the organization really had to turn our minds to that. And it is the people that have been working there for a while that help convey. So you can have those casual conversations with people. So you can have that virtual coffee chat, or did I read this situation right? So I encourage everybody, no matter what level you are in your career, because we're always learning, is just to ask. And if you need help with something, you feeling a little bit vulnerable, there's always that safe person that you'll find. And, vulnerability does build relationships. So just give it a try. The worst that can happen, I always say, is it's no, but not everyone's going to say no. And then my last piece of advice is, you don't always fit with everybody, and that's okay. So, you know, if you do experiment in the formal mentoring and it's not clicking, you can go find someone else, because you will click with someone.
Okay, thanks. Okay, we have another question in the chat. Actually, Lisa, this is for you specifically. So working in education at Humber, what message would you like students to hear about opportunities in the near future? And also, how young, this might be for everyone, how young is too young to be involved in and on boards?
Oh, just quickly, never too young. I believe you're going to bring different perspectives, and you know, you're not always going to get on the big board and you find something. So never too young. And I have to tell you, it's infectious, the perspectives that others bring, and it will be appreciated. So I don't think it's ever too young. And there's lots of resources out there that you can look at to find people that are looking for positions on boards. And, you know, the not-for-profits, smaller, they need help and they're looking for great people, and you'll learn how to be a good governing board member. So never too young. And the first part was about success. Can you give it to me again?
Yeah, working in education at Humber. So this is for Marilyn, who works at education at Humber. What message would you like students to hear about opportunities in the near future? And I do think everyone can answer that if you like.
You know, I think technology, sustainability are keywords that are out there for many of the organizations. And I think that, you know, equality, diversity, and inclusion, there's so many areas that are really beneficial to all organizations. So I think, you know, one of the other areas too that I think we are really struggling with and we just don't understand too is areas in the trades. Like people just, this country is suffering from a need, particularly in Ontario, manufacturing. We need people that love to do that type of work and to encourage it. I think giving a little bit of bias and my perspective in my mid-50 age group, where that was really discouraged. And I don't understand. So many people are like, really, it's about being happy. And if you can find a career and something that makes you happy and you enjoy, you're going to be so much further than anybody else. And really, don't let someone else define success for you. Don't let someone else define how you're going to spend the next 30 years of your life. So there's so many opportunities out there. And I think we all are much happier when we do things that we do well. So if you can find a career or profession in that area that you enjoy and do well, then go for it.
Very, very true. So we're out of time now for questions. I wanted to give everyone a chance to have one final thought before we turn this over to our Chief of Staff to say a few closing remarks. So Claire, I'll start with you and I'll just go around. Anything you want to leave everybody with?
You know, I have this one thought that I always tell young women as they're moving through their careers: pick your seat, you know, take your chair at the table. And, you know, if you just imagine the virtual boardroom table for a moment, and many of us have been there, and you walk into the room and you're thinking about, where should I sit today to make sure that I can make an impact? Don't sit at the end corner.
Yeah.
Sit where you can contribute, sit where you can influence, and use your voice to make change happen and progress. That virtual boardroom, many of us are going to be going back to offices in the near future, or, you know, various different avenues. Take your seat, let people know what you're thinking, and have all the impact you can, because your voice is very, very important.
Thanks, Claire. Barbara?
Yeah, I think it's sort of along the same lines as what Claire's talking about. I feel the fear and do it anyway, right? Like you might get that pit in your stomach kind of going, I don't know if I should be sitting here at this table. No, it is a whole lean in. I mean, I'm sure some of us have read the book, but it's very true. Take your seat at the table, be bold, be prepared. And I think the last thing would be, you know, also look to your network of friends in terms of mentorship. The question around mentorship, it doesn't need to be a CEO of a company or a senior leader, but you look around. I mean, a lot of my mentorship has come from personal friends of mine that have been very, very involved in, philanthropy and initiatives and things like that. And a lot of my learning and mentoring and exploration about what I wanted to do came from conversations that are actually right at your fingertips as well.
Thanks, Barbara. Karen, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I'm a big person about looking at quotes and things like that, and I find that there's a place, if people like quotes, certainly. There's one that I always refer to, and it says, feminism isn't about making women stronger. Women are already strong. It's about changing the way the world perceives that strength. And I said that that is so very true. I'll share one more with you. And this was from Madeleine Albright, who was the 64th United States Secretary of State. And she said, there's a special place in hell for women who don't help other women. And I heard a speaker down in the States years ago who had said this, and I agree with that, because I'm always about empowering people and empowering women in roles like this that are different. And I think to this day, it's worked out quite well. And thanks again for including me today. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much for being a part of it. And Lisa, last thought?
Yeah. My words of advice would just be true to yourself. You have your own image, your own people's perspective on you is in your control. And for me, it's about my integrity and how I want to be remembered. And, I kind of look at it and I want to be respected more than I want to be liked. And I don't want anyone to ever question my integrity and authenticity. So that's, me being true to me. And I just would recommend everybody to be true to themselves.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much for being with us today. Claire, Lisa, Karen, Barbara, it's really been truly inspiring morning for me. Great way to start off the day, frankly. And thank you for sharing your stories and your advice and your honesty. Now I would like to introduce Dr. Ian Pereira, Chief of Staff at Joseph Brant Hospital, who will give a few closing remarks. Over to you, Ian.
Thanks, Anessa. What an important and inspiring morning. African-American educator Booker T. Washington said that if you want to lift yourself up, lift up someone else. The amazing trailblazers in leadership and philanthropy who've joined us today are lifting up our community by challenging the status quo, shaping the conversation, and inspiring and mentoring a generation of young women and girls to be future leaders. On behalf of the staff, physicians, and volunteers at Joseph Brant Hospital, I'd like to thank all the women who've collaborated with the JBH Hospital Foundation to make today's event a reality. Anna and Marianne for participating, our panelists, Anissa, Claire, Lisa, Karen, and Barbara for the insightful conversation, TD and Bell for sponsoring this event, and thank you, our guests, who joined us online, for participating in the conversation and for your generous support of Nina's Place. As Chief of Staff of Joseph Brant Hospital, I've seen firsthand the incredible transformation that can occur when volunteers, champions, and philanthropists come together with a shared passion for a common purpose. Nina's Place is a great example of what we can accomplish together to profoundly impact the lives of women and children in our community. We've already raised almost $15,000 today for this critical program, and it's not too late to donate and have your gift matched by TD. International Women's Day is a time to celebrate all the progress that we have made towards equity and inclusion, and to celebrate the women who have led us on this journey, but we still have a long way to go. And hearing the panel speak today inspires us to continue along this long road to gender equity, led by women like our panelists. So thank you again to our panelists and participants for their generosity. I hope that next year finds us together in person to celebrate International Women's Day in a world that has moved towards peace, health, and equity. Thank you for joining us today, and have a great day.